Hello and welcome to a new video on my channel. Today I want to talk about the Rocketman Adornment and why I think that is the best adornment in the game. In general, we have two adornments that are currently played in the meta, which is the Brigavik Lingering Memories Adornment and the adornment from the current Rocketman event. Without further ado, let's jump right into the video. Have fun! Firstly, let's talk about why the Brigavik Adornment is so strong in early game. You will need a lot of crit in early game, and when played on critical gems, you will get so much value from this adornment because of the unique enchantment with an additional 60% critical value on this item. That's why it's the strongest adornment for early game players, because you will need crit until you reach 380k crit in the city if you have Jewel of Rage. If you don't have the Jewel of Rage, you will need to go for 450k crit in the city. The goal always is to reach the maximum crit on the map. So that's why this adornment is especially strong in early game. Now let's talk about mid-game and endgame builds. In mid-game, it can also be nice to play this one on crit, so you save yourself an additional crit item, so you can switch down to 2 crit items and you don't have to play full 3 crit items, and you can play, for example, an health point item instead for more survivability. Then when reaching endgame and maxing your opals, the most value that you can get out of your opals is when playing the Rocketman Adornment. Why is that? Because you will always have crit and damage on your opals. As every class, the most classes play crit, damage and attack speed. I play crit, damage and movement speed because I use those opals for PvP and PvE, and those are really strong in that case. And of course, with so much move speed on my opals, I can also take out way more movement speed gems out of my boots, and I will still reach 13 movement speed on the map. Now let's look at why I think that although you might reach more damage with the Brigavik Adornment in the city, I think the Rocketman Adornment is still stronger. That's because of how the base damage is calculated. This counts especially for Dragon Knights and Mages, but more on that later. The base damage consists of 3 values: primary damage, the absolute modifier, and relative modifier. Primary damage is fixed by your class. The case of the lowest primary damage, a little bit more have rangers, then dwarfs have the second most primary damage and mages have the most primary damage. Your absolute modifier is all the damage that you obtain as primary damage or as fixed damage from your items. For example, Sargon Amulet has a lot of fixed damage on it, your 5 rings have a lot of fixed damage on them, and also the base damage from all the other items you play, for example, when you have damage on your cloak, etc. Then there's the relative modifier. For the relative modifier, things like runes, pets, jewels, and essences come into play. So if I take out my runes, my damage runes, let's quickly look where they are here. My relative modifier goes down, although my absolute modifier didn't change. Uniques, for example, that give you percentage damage, that's also counted on top of the relative modifier. Now let's dive into this a little bit more detailed with the build planner that I've already shown in my advanced decay guide. Since I'm a Dragon Knight, I'm going to demonstrate this for Dragon Knights first. I've built myself a kind of standard build with green essences because most people already play with green, although I mainly play with blue essences myself. If we look at this, we can activate and deactivate all the buffs and other stacks here. I will leave in those tonics and physics because if you don't play with these, then you should start playing with these ones here. Now let's look at the damage for the Rocketman build that we reach in the city with green tonics active here. That's somewhat around my stats that I also have. Now let's look at the same things, but with the Brigavik build. As you can see, the damage is slightly higher, but you lose the base value of the Rocketman Adornment of attack speed, so we'll have a little bit less attack speed. But now let's come to the interesting part. If we play with higher essences and have our 100% damage buff active, have our belt stacked up, maybe even the Jewel of Amplified Healing and our Furious Battle Cry active, we will reach way higher damage, of course. Now if we do the same thing for the Brigavik build, we will see that we also have higher damage, but although we were higher on city, we are way higher we are 10k higher in the damage with the Rocketman build in the fight. Of course, you can argue that you won't always have all these buffs active, but from a certain point on, you will reach higher damage with the Rocketman Adornment in the fight. Now, if we look at the same thing for mages, we have the modifier of the Blood Mage, which gives you already a lot of relative value in the city. So if we watch the Brigavik build, we see we have a little bit more damage than with the Rocket build here. But if we use higher essences, it's for the Rocket build, and that's for the Brigavik build, we'll instantly see that we will have more damage with the Rocket build. If we also add the buffs, we will realize that the Rocket build will have more damage output than the Brigavik build. This might not be true for every class. You can simply test it. Example for Rangers. As you can see, the Rocket build is still a little bit stronger here. But if we remove all the buffs, and for example we don't have all these damage buffs active and only play with green, it's probably like that as a ranger, the Brigavik build will still be stronger. But let's check this here real quickly. As you can see, Brigavik build with these buffs active will still be stronger, but as soon as you play with higher essences again, or have the buffs active, it also might be that you will do more damage with the Rocketman build. But of course, test it for yourself, use this build planner here. I've linked you both of these builds here in the description, so you can instantly play with the values that I've predefined here and added those to your needs, so you can test how you can optimize your build with Brigavik or the Rocketman Adornment. But don't forget, both adornments are valid endgame options, and they only have a slight difference, as you have seen. It's only a few K damage, which is not the world, but for perfectionists like I am, this is still interesting to watch which is better in which situation. I hope you enjoyed watching the video. That's already it for today, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye!